For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bruce Strazza. I'm a member of Christ Church. I don't know where I'm going to go in my story. I never know where I'll go in my story. What I do know is there's a lot of hurt in my story. My initial introduction to drugs and alcohol was maybe 11, 12 years old, somewhere in that area. I can promise you this, I wasn't the only kid in the neighborhood that was taking pills and smoking pot and drinking beer on the weekends. And I knew at 13, with absolution, that I drank different than the other kids. So when you have the mentality of a 13-year-old, you already have an alcoholic father who you swore that you were never going to be like, you were just like. And then the weight is doubled, and you'll truly never measure up now. Things kind of came crashing to a halt in 1996. I'll never forget it. It was June 16th of 1996. We found my brother Mark dead in the basement of an abandoned house in Baltimore with a needle in his arm, dead from a heroin overdose. That I didn't know how to deal with, and I was crazy. I couldn't stop using cocaine. I couldn't stay numb enough. Early in the beginning of 1997, I just left the home I was living in. I was now homeless in Baltimore City, and I was living underneath a bridge on February 7th of 1997. Something happened. I rolled down the embankment and I found my head hanging over the curb, and a car was coming at me. That was like the moment of clarity that we talk about in recovery. Something had to change. It was the closest near-death experience I had had, although prior to this I was wishing for death because of the feelings I was going through from my brother's death. And oddly enough, there was a business card for a 12-step fellowship in my brother's room when I was a kid, and I stole it because I thought it was cool because it said drug problem on it, and there was an 800 number on there. And I called the number because it was free, and they told me where I could find a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I went. I stayed for a very long time. My life picked back up. I was engaged with recovery. I found people that were like-minded, that were like me, that had been to the places I had been. I started using a sponsor. I started rebuilding the relationships that I had lost. But somewhere in my 9th or my 10th year, I really stopped attending 12-step recovery. My meeting attendance went to the wayside. I stopped calling my sponsor. And above all, I stopped helping people. So get to Cinco de Mayo of 2010. We were opening another restaurant, and we were on a rooftop bar. I made a decision that day to drink. That was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. By 4:30, the wheels had already fallen off the cart, and I was back in my 5-bedroom house on my 1-acre property with my 12 palm trees and my 10-man hot dog, and I was locked in the bathroom smoking cocaine. So it took me about 2 hours for the wheels to fall off the cart. The day that I used, I had over $100,000 in the bank, and I owned 3 businesses. I now had a crystal methamphetamine habit. I was a drug dealer. I was a menace to society, and above all, I was godless. I had taken from all those who loved me, all those who tried to help me, and with a pocket full of money and a pocket full of drugs, I decided to try to kill myself. About 3 o'clock in the morning on July 10th, the pain was great enough, and I couldn't take the chase one more day. So I stripped myself down and I took a walk into the Atlantic Ocean, because my best thinking at the time, at the end of my run, was if I swim far enough and I swim long enough and it's the middle of the night, there's no one to see me, there's no lifeguards, there's no boats. I was past the big waves and I was past the small waves, and I was into the calm of the Atlantic Ocean. And as I went under, I was completely okay with what was about to happen. It's what I wanted to happen. I wasn't thinking about my family. I wasn't thinking about my friends that were going to hurt. I needed to stop my pain. So it was me, the ocean, and the moon. And as it turns out, there was somebody else out there with me. And that was God. And he used the one word that I could possibly pay attention to. And in the middle of going under, not being able to hold myself up anymore in the water, the word Abigail came to my mind, and I started to panic because I knew that the beach I had gone in on, in about 3 hours, my 9-year-old niece played volleyball behind me. And I didn't want Abigail to find me dead like we found my brother. Now, I'd love to tell you that I got really heroic and I found my way back to shore. But what I remember is at that moment I wanted to live more than I wanted to die. But I actually woke up on the shore. I don't remember that journey back to the beach. It was almost as if the hand of God himself carried me back, and he carried me for a purpose. And I guess that kind of brings us to why we're making this video. You know, I had a guy that I sponsor call me and ask me, what is the meaning of life to you? And all I said to him was, if I'm lucky enough, I can live a life of service. And it's not to pay my debt back to society. It's because I feel that's the purpose that God's given me, to help other men that are struggling, that hurt the way I hurt. I help run a men's recovery house. It was the same recovery house that I lived in for 17 months, because when I showed up in my sister Laura's backyard that morning after trying to kill myself, they drove me to my other sister's house here on the other side of Easton. And while I was waiting for rehab, I detoxed in a tent in my sister's backyard. And I sat out in this disgusting heat and I just sweated out the drugs and the alcohol. And 13 days later, I got a call that a local rehab had a bed for me. And I jumped on the opportunity. See, but God knew my heart, and he knew that everything had to be removed so that all that was left was him, and that I would eventually have to turn to him. And I wasn't sure about the spirituality of the program or sure of God in general. Because if there was a God, he certainly wasn't going to forgive me for what I had done. And I had a really good friend who had found spirituality a long time before I did, and had accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, and had waited many, many years to have a conversation with me that happened in the parking lot of the recovery house. He took me over to Rise Up Coffee, and he asked me where I was with God, and I told him what I just told you, that if there was a God, he certainly couldn't forgive me. And he asked me if I was praying, and I said, God doesn't want to hear from me. He took my hands and he prayed with me. And he asked God to reveal himself to me. Again, it was at that moment that I truly felt love, and I felt a blanket of trust wrapped around me, and I knew something special had changed inside of me. And I would wake up every morning way before all the other guys, and I would sit on the porch of that halfway house and I would watch the sunrise looking at the coffee shop. And I would talk to whatever was or wasn't there. And my heart started to soften. My days today are different. You know, Father Bill asked me, I guess I was new here at the church, what my prayer life was like. I said, I don't know, Father Bill. I wake up in the morning and I start praying, and I pretty much talk to God all day long. And then when I go to bed, I thank him. And I think the reason I get so emotional is probably the gratitude. But if you really knew, and a lot of you may know, what it was like out there, the homelessness, the dereliction, the degradation, the distrust of others, what I do know is that Bruce didn't get Bruce clean. I feel like I was handpicked for a purpose, and all I want to do is act accordingly. So when I was talking to Father Bill about my prayer life, I don't know, I just talk to God all day long, and I see and I try to listen for what the mission's going to be. And in our 5 o'clock service on Saturdays, I say the same prayer, and it always makes me emotional. Because there's still people out there that don't know there's a better way of life. There's still people out there that don't know that how much God truly loves them. And people ask me what God's will for me is. Sometimes I don't know what it is, but I do know what it's not. And it's not to take from other people. It's not to put needles in my arm. It's to live a life of service. And if I can continue to live this life of service, life will continue to be amazing. Now, I'm not a man of means. I don't once have the money that I once did. My bills, I'm hand to mouth with my bills and my paychecks. But I can tell you honestly that I am rich beyond measure. Because I wake up every morning and I say a simple prayer. God, I humbly ask you to remove the compulsion for the use of drugs and alcohol. And please give me the courage to not deny anyone that you bring to me. And to let me do for you in this world for all you've done for me.
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken hearted, let rescue begin. And come find your mercy, oh sinner, come near. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal.